Hey, Comics Cubers. Today we're talking to Shaun McLaughlin and Dan Riba, who've worked on the DC Animated Universe, Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, Batman Beyond, Static Shock, stories about Dwayne McDuffie, things that they didn't think would get approved but did, and how they reacted to that, and all this other stuff. It's all here. Come join us. Welcome back to the Comics Cube, everyone. I am with Shaun McLaughlin and Dan Riba, and we are talking about a few shows they worked on that can all be summed up under the one banner of the DC Animated Universe. How are you guys?
Great.
Yes. Well, fantastic.
The DC Animated Universe ran from 1993? No, wait, 1993 to 2005? 2006.
And technically 92 is when it first aired, but I started in 91. So, because that first season of Batman took, a year and a half to do. So we were actually together for a while before it aired.
That was before
off by
my
a year.
time. I showed up in 94.
Right.
You
96.
showed up.
I showed up in 96. I was started at Warner's in 94. I went on to the Superman crew in 96.
Yeah, you showed up for Superman, Shaun, right? Yeah,
that's right.
Episode 14 of Superman was the first one I worked on. The Flash. Superman Raises the Flash was the first one.
It's fun.
Before that, you were working on Pinky and the Brain.
Right, and Animaniacs, and doing development on a Metal Men show that didn't get off the ground.
Well, now I want to ask about that.
Yeah. Was that with Boyd?
Yeah. Yeah, it's Grant Moran and Boyd. Yeah.
Yeah. Before we go on, and before I forget, I just want to let you know, Shaun, that Pinky and the Brain is my girlfriend's favorite cartoon, and she wants to say hi to you and thank you for Pinky and the Brain.
I had very little to do with it. I was mostly moving paper, and I wrote one episode. So.
Okay.
Oh, well, that's something.
That's something. That's more than anyone else.
That's more than that's more than I did on the show.
Yeah.
Which,
and mine mine, of course, was the Superman crossover.
But what I want to know from you, Shaun, regarding Batman is, as somebody who wasn't there, what was it like, working in the industry and watching that episode, watching that series?
It was, I was at DC when they started working at it. I was writing for DC, and then right after that, and it was one of those things where everything I think is winding up on the screen. That to me, it felt like somebody was finally doing it right, and it all made sense to me. So it was, I didn't feel so alone after that, because at DC I was often a voice in the wilderness, screaming that we should try this and we should try that, and then seeing Batman the Animated Series gave me some hope that somebody eventually listens to that stuff.
Did you have a particular aspect of Batman the Animated Series that stood out to you?
Well, the design sense, the fact that it was set in sort of a nowhere time that could borrow stuff that we were doing now and stuff from film noir tropes, and put them together seemed great. The idea that there was actual, even though it was well staged, there was a show that had actual sort of violence in it again, which I hadn't seen on TV since I was a little kid. Before that, it was always, how do we fight robots? How do we show a fight without actually showing a fight? And Batman the Animated Series seemed to take that and sort of strip it down in a way to more base essentials. There wasn't ray guns or shooting beams out of their hands or stuff like that. And to me, I wasn't an animation guy. I was interested in animation, but I wasn't an animation person. But I had seen all the Fleischer Supermans, and it seemed like it took the absolute best stuff from that and was able to synthesize it into a TV series.
Dan, I know you love the Fleischer Supermans, so I feel like that's a great segue to get you to talk about the influence of the Fleischer Supermans on Batman the Animated Series.
Well, it's extraordinary, because that was the one draw when Kevin called me up and said, "Hey, we're working on this thing. I just got hired. They're doing the Batman, but we're doing it Fleischer Superman style." That was his wording, And I had already seen the promo, so I'm like, yes, Kevin, I know. I want to. I'm in, please. And so yeah, that was the big draw. What I didn't know was that was actually the edict of Jean McCurdy. Until I just saw a documentary recently, an interview with her when she talked about it. I'd heard her talking about it. Believe me, she mentioned it at the time in interviews. But I thought it was one of those things that came sort of after the fact that people like, oh, look what we're doing, and she noticed. No. That it actually, she had actually asked for that, and that's coincidentally what Bruce and Eric were developing on their own independently, and they were like, oh, you want that, Gene? Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. So I had no idea, as I just thought that was more of an artist thing to do, not an exec concept. It was kind of neat. I was like, yeah, Gene was the right person at the right time to do this show.
Because there were dueling Batmans in development at the same time, right?
Really?
Before my time. But yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm not going to mention names, but there were lots of potential versions that were out there, and even just before, like about a year or two before, there was a script that had leaked. Very prominent science fiction and comic author, writer had written one, and it was still during the whole no violence kind of thing. So that reflected in the script. It was really sort of milder versions of everything, and it was okay, but it was a little talky because it was talky, and then our version was like, oh my gosh, these guys are getting it right. It was pretty cool, and the network let us get away with murder. I mean,
literally,
really. I mean, some of it off camera, but it literally, we got to see death finally, like on Saturday morning, and that wasn't done. It really wasn't done.
And looking back now, it seems like it hit a great fine line between being too dark and being too light, and the show was really sort of straddled that, and it's what comics have done, to my mind, in the past 20 years, have just gone to the really dark part and take all that stuff, but this maintained the fun aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
I felt like when you're talking about that particular type of tone, I felt it was very Bronze Agey. It's just the right balance of dark and light.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. There might have been the age of all the people putting it together, because that was when most of us were coming up, I think.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, because the 80s things changed a lot, and we were witnesses to that, but we also kind of knew we were doing a Saturday morning show, but we wanted to have touches of that without dwelling on it, and it ended up hitting a perfect medium, because noir is really dark, but they don't show everything. Things happen off camera. Things are implied, because of all of the codes that were, and we were subject to the same sort of censorship. However, less than other shows at the time. So, X-Men had to use ray guns, and we were actually allowed to use stylized, simplified 45s and Tommy guns and stuff. But
there was a rule that as long as it wasn't imitatable, right? So you could make the argument that, like, what kid can get their hand on a Tommy gun, Thompson submachine gun now? So
right. So the 45s and the pistols had to be sort of blocky and simple, and that was like, well, that was easy because the basic shapes are recognizable. So you just remove some of the details, and now it's a fantasy gun.
Right. And then you always had prop guys who were like, well, you're just dumbing it down because I can draw a dead-on perfect Colt 1911.
But we did get away with that on the Jonah Hex episode, because it was like, well, it's historical now.
Right. Not a lot of kids can get their hands on a single action Colt.
Because I mean, Joe Denton went through this entire model sheet with all how they're loaded and all the hammer, how it works, and it's like, it was awesome in every conceivable angle of that gun, so that animators would know how to shoot it.
Do you think you got away with that on the Jonah Hex episode, partly because it's historical, but also partly because it's much later on in the show?
Yes. Yes. That they started letting things go that they didn't earlier. We got away with blood in the first episode because of the they argued that Batman and Man-Bat hitting a wall would cause some damage, and the network was like, yeah, we shouldn't we shouldn't encourage kids to run into walls. So they allowed to have a little tiny blood on his lip, or so. But after that, they were like, okay, no blood, no blood, and then every now and then a little scratch would show up, and the little tiny bits. Well, it's and we kind of got away with little hints of it here and there. So as the series progressed, they kind of let go with the little tiny bits of blood here and there.
Yeah,
But,
it fascinates me always whenever the Man-Bat episode is referred to as the first episode, because it wasn't the first episode aired here in the Philippines. That drives me nuts.
I know.
It was the second episode aired in the Philippines.
Right. Well, it technically was. I believe they ran it prime time, and then Cat and Claw was our first two-parter that ran in sequence, and then it showed up. Then Man-Bat showed up on the regular rotation, but yeah, it was a prime time special thing, I think.
Okay, it was Christmas with the Joker in the Philippines.
Oh.
I take it you guys weren't too happy about that one.
And it's fine. They're all fine. It's like Star Trek. There's no bad episode. They're just ones that are less interesting.
No, but if you wanted to put Bruce in a bad mood, all you had to say was Christmas with the Joker.
Yeah.
And then leave the room.
Yeah.
Really?
It was. Well, it was early on. The tone was different. They were going for more wacky, and the script honestly was pretty dark. There was a lot of humor in it, and there was a lot of the script actually was okay. It was done in a way that was like a little bit too campy and goofy, and that kind of we're like, oh, we're going wacky here, and like actually. It was originally going to be a really dark story about a family being kidnapped on Christmas, and the network's like, you can't do this. So they had to be Summer Gleason and Bullock and stuff, and a fake family being kidnapped, because it was sort of like we can't just like take random strangers and put them in peril like this, and it just isn't done.
Now I learned something about Christmas with the Joker. Shaun, did you have a favorite character that the series portrayed?
Batman the animated series, or
the Batman
or
the
any of
animated series first?
I liked the way Dick Grayson and Robin was handled. I was obsessed with Robin when I was a little kid, and then when you get older, you realize that there's many problematic aspects with this character. Mm-hmm. But I really liked the line they took with him in that. I liked Rogel's Robin's Reckoning episode, because it seemed to me like it was dark and it was still fun and made sense to put Robin in there. So I was really happy with that.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention that. I just did a podcast, a commentary on those two episodes, and even though Dick Sebast directed them, he had left by the time they came in, so I helped edit. So I was in the editing room when they came in, and I, the crew, we knew we had something special, so the crew came in, as many as they could, and watched it on a Moviola, which is a very small screen. It's funny because it wasn't even on a flatbed with the bigger screen. It was the Moviola. It was the small one, and we're all kind of crowding over and like heads trying to look at this little tiny screen. And it's essentially like watching a show on your phone.
Yeah, but not as comfortable.
And exactly. and even without the music and without any editing, just the raw footage, we were all wrapped up in the story, and by the time the circus crew is waving and the elephant waves goodbye to Dick, Bruce and I both had welled up eyes. I'm not going to say I blubbered. I didn't say I cried, but there was yeah, we kind of moistened a little. It's like, and Britt's like, "Are you crying?" And I'm like, "No, no, you are." Like, it really hit us hard. It was really emotional. It's wonderful. It's really amazing.
For me, working on stuff like that, there's levels to it. It's not always necessarily the episode, though the episode has to hit the right thing, but it's also being an adult and having grown up with this stuff, and growing up when Dan and I did, and being a nerd meant that, you got beat up after school, or you had problems like that. And then you see it, when you see stuff on TV, like we would watch the Red Brown Captain America movies because that was all there was. And like, we would hope that this stuff would be good. And even though we realize, if you're of a certain mind, you realize that it's not good, but you're still hoping it is. And then to see this stuff actually realized, to me, things like Batman the Animated Series, the first Superman movie, the first Avengers movie were emotional to me, not necessarily because of what was going on, but because somebody's doing what I saw in my head as a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then again, like having worked with like people like Jack Kirby, you're gonna go, wow, if only Jack had seen this, you'd go, man, yeah, you just get emotional, not just for that little child you were reading the comics, but for all of these guys who are making this stuff, and what would they have thought, when this stuff hit big, and all the whole world knows their characters now.
Absolutely.
When Dan and I were coming up, when I was at Fantagraphics, I met Jack, I met Doug Wildey, I met Gil Kane, and to have that connection to those people and then see these sort of visions realized is very emotional. That probably isn't for a civilian person, someone who dated in high school.
Did you guys know each other before working on Superman?
No, and I never liked him. I don't like him now.
I spent way too many hours in Shaun's office discussing movie serials and old cartoons and stuff. So the revelation that there was another voice for Superman in the Fleischers, I was like, no, that's not true. It was,
Bud Collyer. It's all Bud Collyer.
It's all Bud Collyer. And you're like, no, it isn't. And then you listen to him and you go, oh, holy crap, that's not the same guy. And now that guy has been identified, and so it's like there is a name to go to that voice now. But I didn't realize that until then. You're like, that's common knowledge. Come on, Dan, you should know this. I'm like, yeah, I should.
The neat thing I always thought about Dan, and that I hope he thinks about me, is that we both were like, we liked the same stuff when we were kids. We liked movie serials. We liked Golden Age comics. We liked the Golden Age Captain Marvel. Over your shoulder and stuff like that. But we also, Dan is one of the few people who I think realize that stuff's not perfect, right? There are fans who look at that stuff and go, the Fleischer Superman is the best Superman, and nothing can ever change from that. And we can both look at it and appreciate it. And still, movie serials suck. They're pretty bad storytelling. They're bad acting, occasionally bad directing. Stunt work's wonderful, but they're a ton of fun. But there are people who look at them and go, why do you talk about Citizen Kane when Spy Smasher exists? And I think we both see both sides of that coin.
Don't you be talking bad about Spy Smasher.
Right. Dan, I think Dan and I both shared the experience of turning on WOR in the 70s and seeing the Spy Smasher movie and going, what? There's a movie that exists? What?
Actually, I didn't grow up in New York, so I got that stuff later. I
thought you were around New York. I know you were in Washington.
I went to school. I went to school there, so I was 4 years in the 70s.
But you grew up in Washington mostly, right? In Washington and Argentina.
Yeah. I just visited Argentina a lot, but I did spend summers there.
Right.
But yeah, Washington D.C. area. But I know WR, and I used to watch movies all the time on that, so I know what you're talking about. But it's but the lighting on the Spy Smasher thing is the best I've ever seen in a serial, where it feels like cinematic. You're just like, this is. But you're right. It's they're all just you know, just getting stuff done.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I do feel like what you're talking about, Sean, which is the love for the older stuff, but realizing that it's not perfect, is what made you guys such an apt fit for working on these things. Because I think that a lot of people who are too reverential to stuff don't actually, they're too reverential. Like it's just a tasteful homage so much that I don't really care to read it or watch it anymore because I've seen it before.
right, right.
exactly.
You can only go back to that same well so many times. I mean,
Right.
I think that the secret, and what I've told people since then, is that I think Paul grew up a DC fan,
Good.
right?
I think so.
But Bruce didn't. Bruce
No.
didn't particularly care for DC.
Yeah,
Bruce
no.
was a big Marvel fan.
Right.
So
Really?
he liked some characters, so he looked at it, but he was able to look at it from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't like, I'm not part of the Bruce Timm cult, though I am still called one of those snooty Tim guys. I mean, there were a lot of other people involved with putting that show on the air, like Eric and Alan and Tom Ruger
Mhm.
and people like that. So, but I do think that the fact that everybody had a broader viewpoint made a big change, and that was part of what made that really work well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a super reverential Superman guy, for example, would not do what you guys did in Justice League Unlimited, where he was basically a dick for for half the season.
Well, he's got a specific viewpoint on how the world should work,
Yeah.
and he's constantly disappointed, I think.
And also he was dealing with some baggage.
Lots of baggage.
Yeah.
He had witnessed a darker version of himself, and knew where he could end up. So it did something to his head. He kind of like this sort of self-doubt now, that what if I and those buttons were pushed a lot, and so that's why. Because like the Clash episode, it was like, I love that episode. I think it's really cool. But man, he is a dick in that one, and But it's like we had to have the Captain Marvel Superman fight. We had to have that. That's the whole point of the thing, and he was just sort of manipulated into that fight.
And what a wrestling match that was to get the rights to use that character. But yeah, I mean, he had Superman had his head handed to him by Darkseid.
Yeah,
Darkseid, excuse me, in the series, in the Superman series. So that was the first time he'd like really come close to losing.
Exactly.
And he came close to losing several times. I mean, I remember the everybody was really happy in the crew when we did the Lobo episode of Superman, because at least he can finally cut loose on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he'd had his world had changed considerably through that.
And a voice that we Dwayne actually contributed so much to that perspective. The idea, in the first season, we had to kind of take Superman out a lot because we had the other characters had to shine, and so he was electrocuted a lot. He was gassed. He was whatever we could do to like put him on the side, because we can't have him like always, oh, he's off on another world fixing stuff. And it's like, come on, no, we have to kind of have him there, but then he has to be taken out so other characters could shine. And it was a little inelegant in the very beginning because we were trying to find our way. And then Dwayne kind of wrote a couple of lines later on that kind of like, oh, well, there you go. Where he actually talks about taking the first hit, and he talks about living in a world of cardboard and not knowing what it's like, and to have to like restrain. But then when he gets a Mongol or a Darkseid to like to hold, really like, oh boy, now I get to really punch someone.
I remember.
Go ahead. Dan won't say it. I will. Things changed a lot when Dwayne took over the writing. There was it was not as good before. Let's put it that way.
I want to say, in the most polite manner I possibly can, yes.
I missed Dwayne terribly. I mean, of all the people when I left California, Dwayne was one of the people that I stayed in touch with and talked to him every couple of months, and
Yeah.
I had gone to my desk, I had thought about something, and I was going to call him when I turned on my computer and saw that he'd passed. So
Yeah.
Dwayne is a huge loss, and his contribution to all of this stuff cannot be minimized.
Yeah, no, because I was in college when Justice League came out, and so I was living in the States, and I realized I would watch this show with my friends, right? And some of them never read a comic because have never read a comic. They're only passingly familiar with the characters. But then in season 1, for example, once I think it's the Savage Time, Superman's lifting a tank and he audibly grunts. And somebody who has never read a comic actually says to me, like, why is Superman having trouble lifting a tank? Right? Now, I love the Savage Time. It's got some great use of Blackhawk. It's got some great use of Steve Trevor and Wonder Woman. But I do think that the first episode of season 2, which was Twilight, I was like, oh yeah, this is it. This is the show. And did it feel like there was a turning point when you guys just decided to let Superman cut loose?
It wasn't. The turning point wasn't Superman cutting loose. There was an internal turning point that involved a lot of yelling. That we'll just go over that.
We'll just leave it like that.
Yeah.
So but it was noticed. So that's the efforts were made to correct. And
the only thing I'll say is that I'll to put a button on it. Dan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it involved me walking into someone's office, sitting across from their desk, and going, "Not the boss, the boss." Are we clear?
I wanted to ask about that, like really, just to lay it out for everyone clearly. Like, how was the working relationship between you guys? Like, what were your specific roles?
Specific roles? That's a I don't know, that's a concept we ever had.
Well, it's just that, like, when I look at Dan's job description, I feel like I could figure that out. But when I look at your job description, Shaun, like, I don't know what an associate producer does. Like,
the joke was, and it was true, and I said this at the last San Diego con. They asked me what I do, and I pointed at Bruce, and I said, I do everything he doesn't want to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's the calling the artists, making the deals with the artists. It's the schedules. It's budget issues. It's everything that an artist hates to do. That's the stuff that we're like, just let me talk to the guy and do the storyboard, and we'll work on this stuff. But it's like there's so much to a cartoon that has much more to deal with. You have to get it out the door, and Shaun was the guy that helped us, that really like pushed us out the door, and got us to make a cartoon.
I wound up finding the artists. I did the recruiting. I did first pass on portfolios. I did first pass on scripts. Remember I don't know, Dan, do you remember when we decided to search for a new story editor, and my office with the piles and piles of scripts in it, I had to read to cut down the over the transom stuff. I mean, it was all of that stuff. It was literally everything Bruce didn't want to do.
Right.
It was anything he wanted to not take care of was me. I was first pass on portfolios, first pass on writers, first pass on everything.
And by the way, were you responsible for us hiring Keith Giffen for boards?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. That was
let's talk about him for a little bit.
One of the biggest joys of my career, getting to talk to and work with Keith on Batman Beyond and Static Shock was my phone calls with him were just so much fun. And it was I had never met him. I was a fan, but to actually get to know him on the phone and work with him was really quite a joy.
The first time I met Keith I was doing a signing at San Diego Comic-Con when I was writing Aquaman, and Keith was at the table next to me, and that was the first time I'd met him. And I remember this guy comes over to the table. So this is 91, 92. And a guy comes over to the table and he's got a G.I. Joe set of Justice Society characters. He's bought a bunch of G.I. Joes. He's put them in absolutely perfect Justice Society costumes. And this is before you could buy, figures that you could just make. You had to buy G.I. Joes and customize them yourself. And he built a scale of the Justice Society shield table. And he was carrying this thing around, and he brought it up to the table. And I remember he started coming over, and I went, "Holy shit, that's cool!" And Giffen grabbed my arm and pulled me down and said, "No, he's just going to draw you into his little world."
How perfect was that last post by Keith Giffen?
Oh my gosh,
brilliant!
Wow. And did he like what you guys did with Lobo? I assume so.
I got to talk to him about it, and yes, he did. He was happy. He said, it's amazing. You guys cleaned him up for Saturday morning, and yet you didn't take off any of his rough edges. It was still the character, and he was pleased. He was pleased. I was so glad.
So I want to ask about Superman the Animated Series, because I know, Shaun, that's when you came in, the 14th episode. Dan, because I remember reading in Wizard magazine, Bruce basically saying that it was a struggle to get the show to work.
Yeah.
What exactly was the struggle here? Because what he said, you had a Bible and you liked the Bible, but you chose not to go through with the Bible. If I'm remembering right, I don't have that issue anymore.
There were designs. There was a whole design thing.
Right. But even a focus was different, because Bruce was sort of like Ruby Spears, if you recall, just about 4 years before had just done a Superman show that was sort of loosely based on the movie and the current comics. And Marv Wolfman was one of the story editors. So that was a fairly accurate, and Gil Kane had done designs. So it was okay, so they had just done a Superman cartoon. So how do we take this and make it ours? And Bruce was like, well, we're not going to we can't just have Clark and Lois and the Daily Planet. We've got to do something else. Let's do the Justice League. And DC and Gene McCurdy were like, no, no, Batman had his show. Superman has to have his show. We're just going to do the same show, that we're just going to do his own show, and he has to show. And then later on down the line, when you're ready, you can do a Justice League. So, and eventually that came to pass. So we had to kind of go, oh, okay. And then we were like, oh, okay, Bruce wanted to do okay, let's do the Fleischers. Let's go back to the source and let's do that version that hasn't really been done since the 40s. So we're doing that, and then they were like, how we told you to do the Fleischer Superman for Batman? Well, we don't want you to do the Fleischer Superman for Superman. And they all kind of came down, both DC and Gene and Warner's. They wanted something fresh and new for today. And they wanted something to separate from the Batman. It was also, keep in mind, this wasn't for Fox. This is the WB. Warner Brothers had their own network. They wanted something to be different from what we had done. So they were like, we want it just as good, but we don't want you to make the same show and just put Superman in. And I'm like, oh, well, we just wanted to make the same show and put Superman in. But okay.
To talk about how the business has changed, DC was I describe Warner Brothers as feudal Japan. Right, all the different divisions are fighting for the Shogun's approval, but they're not really in line with each other. DC held on to some of these characters with a death grip, so that they didn't want you to put too many of their characters out at the same time, because they were afraid it was going to hurt other options. I remember, Dan, with Justice League, we were talking about turning Qatar Hall into a bad guy.
Yeah.
And I remember being at a meeting in the big conference room on the second floor, and Levitz saying, no, you can't do that. You're going to hurt a possible Hawkman movie deal. And me being, my usual political self said, come on, Paul, what fucking Hawkman movie deal's going on? Come on, where's the deal? Let us use the character. Because I make friends wherever I go.
Yeah. But that was the time though, where
Right.
if they did have an option on something, you're like, okay, now you can't use this, and this because suddenly we're working on a Metamorpho show, and you go, who would be the greatest villain would be Chemo. Chemo would be awesome for this, but because they had a Metalman in the works, and they were like, you know what, Metalman doesn't have a huge rogues gallery. Chemo is pretty much
shitty rogues gallery.
Exactly.
I can tell you for a fact,
right? So it's like Chemo is pretty much it, So you're like, okay, so you can't have the big glass creature with chemicals inside, which is like, oh, come on, that's what that Element Man would fight. He would fight a big jar full of elements. It's like so we had to kind of fake that and create a different thing for that because they wouldn't let us use Chemo. And then Aquaman was optioned for something, and all of his villains, and we're like, well, what has he got? Black Manta. Holy crap, we were going to use Black Manta in the script. And Dave Johnson came up with a cipher, which was better.
Devil Ray.
Yeah, it was like, oh my gosh. He just got, I got something. And he draws this thing, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's better. All right, good. We're good. We got our Black Manta. And he's a better character, so fine.
all that stuff was a wrestling match. I remember specifically with Shazam / Captain Marvel. I remember the day after Thanksgiving, sitting at my house in Tarzana and talking to Levitz over what we could and couldn't do to use Billy Batson / Captain Marvel. It had to be once. It had to be a one-off. He couldn't be a regular character. He could only appear for X a number of minutes in the episode. And it was, I just, because I'm such a good politician, I kept saying, we're in the same company. You know that, right?
Right. And there was a thing where we had the entire Justice League, and this is Justice League Unlimited, so it's unlimited. So we had that one episode with the spiders and all this stuff that killed the studio overseas. I mean, literally, they people quit on it because they were like, I don't want to draw those spiders, but we had a group shot, and we were going to actually have, and I wanted to put Captain Marvel in the background because we knew he was going to be in the group, and Bruce is like, no, we have a one-time use.
Yep.
If DC sees him in the background, we lose that. So we're like, oh shit. So we tailored the episode.
Darkheart? That was Darkheart?
That was Darkheart, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a Shazam project in the works. William Goldman had written the screenplay for it. It was his favorite superhero when he was a little kid.
Yeah.
And apparently he'd done, according to Paul, it was too faithful an adaptation to ever really move forward, which is another time I just sort of rolled my eyes and drank my coffee.
Now, so was DC the one that pulled the plug on that, or was it Warner's that decided it wasn't a film?
I don't know. I know Paul was complaining that it was too faithful to the 40s comics.
My mind is blown. William Goldman wrote a Shazam Captain Marvel adaptation.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it was a complete love letter to the Golden Age Captain Marvel.
Yes.
And we didn't get this movie made?
We didn't get that movie made. No, we get something else.
Zachary Levi decades later.
Yeah.
There was a Hawkman series in the works too, very briefly too. There was very briefly a Hawkman series in the works with John Fasano, who wrote Tombstone.
Wow. That would have been cool.
That would have been cool. Yes, that would have been cool.
Yeah, well, you didn't have to go to Sicily and feed him every week. Why could he eat?
Shaun, when you got on Superman, because I've asked Dan, I asked that because I met Dan back in March, and we were talking about the success of the DC animated universe, right? And Dan, I remember asking you, like, do you feel pressure with everything you've done afterwards to live up to the success of DC animated universe? And your answer was no, because Superman wasn't as successful as Batman. And so you've already gone through that.
Well,
that was a simple answer.
So the deal with Superman was and I don't know if you were in any of these meetings, Dan, but the network was unhappy with Superman because it was on at 7:30, I think, on Saturday mornings. It was this first or second show of the lineup, and it was pulling the largest 18 to 25-year-old audience in the history of Saturday morning. So the network was not happy about it. And I remember Alan Burnett's answer was, sell beer commercials. What's your problem?
Exactly.
So it was pulling a smaller rating, but was pulling a very high rating with people above that, and they were constantly disappointed with that. And I went to a network meeting, and they were talking about this. This is before the changeover at the network, and I remember saying, so it's pulling, say it's a 2.5, say it's pulling a 2.5, and it was number 2 or number 3 on Saturday morning, because it was the CW just didn't, Kids WB didn't have the coverage, right? I think we were only in 85% of the country. And my thing was like, okay, yeah, but if you leave that show there, it's going to pull that rating from now until the end of time. You never have to worry about that time slot again, because it's Superman, and Superman's a perennial. But that they weren't happy with that. That wasn't what they wanted.
No, they wanted kids to be watching that particular time slot.
Right, and they wanted Batman numbers, and what they didn't realize at the time were that those numbers were starting to erode as the market was eroding. I mean, Saturday morning was at the point. I mean, when we were kids, Saturday morning was the only time cartoons were on, and now when Superman's on the air, as opposed to when Batman the Animated Series was on the air, you have Disney and Nickelodeon becoming more and more power, and just keeping on rolling. So kids could watch cartoons at any time. So it wasn't appointment TV anymore. And
the difference is also that Batman was made to be stripped for the week. It was a weekly. So it was a daily show, I mean to say, that it was on Monday through Friday. And Superman wasn't. It was on the Saturday morning. And that was a different world, the Saturday morning versus the Saturday afternoon, because you could get away with getting adults to watch a show in the afternoon,
right?
Because they're going to be watching with their kids and stuff like that. And that's how many, I'd always constantly get mothers thanking me for entertaining them while they watched their cartoons with their kids. Not so much people complaining about the violence. I was very very fortunate that
I got those phone calls.
You got those phone calls. Yeah. For the most part, I was always like, what? They'd see a shirt or jacket I'm wearing, and they're like, that's a great show. I watched that with my kid. But Superman was on Saturday morning, and those are completely different. And mind you, by the way, the very first airing of Batman, when we talk about the primetime airing, that on Leather Wings, when it ran primetime, Playtex ran an ad, and there was some Lincoln Continental ad or some kind of car, luxury car, and I'm like, this is a cartoon, and we're pulling in Playtex bra ads. It's like, where's the cereal? Where are the toys? This is really weird. It was hard to fathom that it was actually being treated as an adult thing.
Right. The whole landscape of animation was changing at that time, and television in general. Like the Pinky and the Brain went prime time. They produced episodes for prime time, and it got canceled fairly quickly because the ratings were so low. And if the CW had a show with those ratings now, they would be signing you to multi-year contracts.
Exactly. Yep.
So let me get this straight. So Batman the Animated Series, correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I didn't grow up there. It aired on prime time.
Two airings, I think, right?
No, actually, this is what happened. There was a pilot that ran the On Leather Wings as a kickoff. Then it was a weekly, of Monday through Friday, a daily show. And then the ratings were so high, and they realized they did the numbers, and they realized adults were watching, and they went, you know what? We don't have anything opposite 60 Minutes. It's the death slot. Let's put Batman on opposite 60 Minutes, and we'll do okay, because we got nothing. It was counter programming, and of course it and I think they paired it with The Simpsons, so it was sort of like, oh, our cartoon block, and they did that for just a short while. They pulled The Simpsons off right away because they realized, okay, nobody's watching because 60 Minutes is the #1 show. but they left Batman on for a few weeks. I think we only had 13 weeks on prime time, but it was enough to win it an Emmy. So we got our first Emmy from Robin's Reckoning won an Emmy
Oh, really?
the year that it ran on prime time.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, that was pretty cool. But unfortunately, the ratings sucked, and they pulled it off.
So, but here's the thing that I don't get: it was airing at nighttime on weekdays, right?
No.
Afternoons.
No, on afternoons. Okay, it was
afternoons.
It was airing on afternoons,
right?
I presume after school.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. It was airing on afternoons after school. It had some slots on prime time, and Superman was airing on a network that had 85% coverage.
Right.
No. This is later. This is years, and this is a couple of years later.
So this is like with much less coverage at 7:30 in the morning.
Right. On
Saturdays, and that network wanted it to do Batman numbers. That's impossible.
Of course.
Yes. Well, yeah. Well,
like it wouldn't have mattered. Batman wouldn't have done Batman numbers.
Right. What's your point?
Like, why would they have that expectation?
So I've been in this business for 30 years, and animation, and I work with live action now. And if you're trying to apply logic, you're applying it in the wrong place.
Terrible. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are the same people that said Superman has to have a rocket ship and a spacesuit.
Yeah.
Same sort of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to ask about that too, because at the time in the comics, we were coming from John Byrne's revamp. So Superman was very depowered.
Mm-hmm.
Was that a factor into his power level in the cartoon, or was it just to sell toys?
Somewhat, but it's also still a spill off of the Fleischer thing. The fact that Superman would struggle to stop a plane, which we kind of ripped off in our pilot, basically. There was an episode in the Fleischers where he's stopping the aircraft carrier and the struggle is just so dramatic and so wonderful to see him actually, not find something effortless. It's something fun to watch, and you actually kind of like, oh, there's drama here. He might fail. And so that was really more the thinking. It wasn't like, oh, they're doing this in the comics. It's just that idea of the guy who can move the earth out of the way of a meteor. It's like, must move Mother Earth. It's like, no, we didn't want that guy. Turn back the clock. Turn the spinning, the rotation of the earth. We didn't want something that powerful, because it's hard to write for something when he's a god.
Right.
And so that's the impetus for the depowering is actually just drama more than anything.
But what's your stance on the spacesuit and the rocket ship?
When we depowered him, it made sense. We decided to put limitations on things like, he can only he can't breathe in space. He has to hold his breath. So he can't stay there in space unlimited amount of time. Or deep sea. That was the other one. The deep sea suit. Come on. I mean, I'm sure he can hold his breath as long as a whale, and they do just fine, It's not like he's gonna. Oh, the pressures. Come on,
All that pressure came from Kenner,
and that came from Kenner. Yeah.
The dirty secret of kids animation back in those days was that the show. Part of the reason the show gets on the air is the toy deal.
Right.
But that was one of the things that hurt Static, because the toy deal was not there.
Yeah. And the thing with the spaceship, I don't mind, because it's like, hey, he came to Earth in a spaceship. Yeah. That is canon, We and the idea that the Kents had kept it and going, hey, this is what you came in, it's like I can kind of see, I can kind of see that, and the implication that he would need a spaceship to go, long distances in space is like, yeah, okay, I can kind of, that's fine. But but I don't want, good thing we didn't do the supercar or anything like that. No, he doesn't need, That's a bit much.
Sean, your
And
first
DC did that. You
Sean, your first episode of Superman like was the one with the Flash. You just jumped in right into the DC universe right away.
That and I had two much older brothers. They were 11 and 13 years older than me. So I had a copy of that first Superman Flash race comic when I was a kid. So yeah, it was pretty cool. It was very serendipitous.
Yeah.
In your mind, though, who wins?
A race between Superman and the Flash?
Yeah,
Superman.
really. Dan, are you in the same boat?
You know, yeah.
Really?
Because his powers come from Krypton. I mean, he is, even our depowered Superman, it's like yeah, but close.
I would have thought you
Yeah.
would have said Flash because it's the only thing he has.
Well, that's what happened on the Justice League. We had to kind of go, all right, it's all he's got, so we got to give that to him. That was the heartbreaker, because I came up with this really cool smear for Superman for his super speed. That there's a blur that comes in, and I figured out how to do it based on a Chuck Jones cartoon, The Dover Boys, and I used it on a Batman episode, and I figured out how to make the smear and how to time it, and how many frames it takes, and what's the percentages of the double exposure for those smears, and it really looks like it's airbrushed or something, and it's really just cells that are DX'd, that are double exposed. So and it really just feels like a blur, and so I was so happy with that, and it was one of those things that it was my mark on that series, was like the way that Superman like blurs into a scene.
You're underselling yourself.
Oh, there are a few other marks.
Yeah.
but the thing is, that is the thing that I did for the series that was in every episode. That was that was the thing that made its way through the entire all the episodes, pretty much, because he always has to do that at some point. When we came to Justice League, Bruce was like, Dan, sorry, I got to break it to you. We're losing the blur. We can't do that anymore. And I'm like, what? Because I was so proud of that blur. And Bruce knew. He knew I was proud of it. But he was like, no, because we got the Flash, and it's all he's got. We can't showcase Superman's speed as much anymore, unless it's a specific, story point that he has to come in super fast. The Flash has to get there first.
Didn't you have to do it for the last episode when he's fighting Darkseid?
Oh, I'm sure they did. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. It's not like it was retired. It's just was underplayed, and we really couldn't. We didn't do it in episodes where the Flash was there and doing stuff, because
and there were rules that were put in place, like we can't do this, we can't do that, in terms of their powers and trying to logic it out. That if the story point conflicted with it, would occasionally get just kicked out the door.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a rule and we have to, because it's not physics. It's superheroes are somewhat more malleable. Yeah. But Dan's another one of the people who's been there since the beginning, and I don't think people understand how huge his contribution to that DC universe is, both from his knowledge and his talent. I mean, Dan came up with an extraordinarily good education in graphics and a huge amount of knowledge, not only on comic book and trivia, but Dan is a font of information on how to do classical animation. And Dan is very open to moving things into a new direction, that things don't have to be done the same way. I mean, we were the first digital production at Warner Brothers. Mm-hmm. And, Dan, well, I don't know if you remember my fights, Dan, with TMS over what black means.
Oh my gosh.
Dan understood all this stuff instinctively, and with a huge amount of animation knowledge. I mean, there are people there who had a good amount of knowledge and were really talented animators, but Dan can literally do anything. He can design characters. He can design props. He can storyboard. He could animate a whole episode by himself if he had to. He understood color theory. He understood everything.
Dan, feel like
well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's like, but there are people there that had expertise on things that knew, yes, I dabbled in all that he describes,
Right.
sure. But yes, there are painters that have better color theory. It's like it's sort of like, yeah, that's why you have the experts in there as well, to do the thing. But yeah,
it sounds to me like you were the glue guy, like the guy who would fill in for people, like,
Well, we couldn't use glue around Dan because if it got into his office, he'd just never be out. He'd glue himself to his desk or something.
I mean, look, when they were doing the Return of the Joker, and I basically, like, every character designer on the show was on that movie, essentially. And you're like, well, Dan, you got a crew of nobody now. And this board guy and this board guy who hadn't done it before, you got to train them. You got to work on this. And so I would, like, make, oh, well, okay, I got this script. I'll figure out the effects for this. I'll come up with character designs for this. And so for like a half a dozen episodes, maybe less, but
well, you had character designers, but we were training a shit ton of people.
But I'm telling you, I was taking existing designs and then reworking faces and reworking costume stuff for,
right.
But that I don't even know the names of the episodes anymore, but there were like the one with the Force Shield character and all this stuff. It was like half the incidentals, I'm just like redoing all the faces and reworking, and it was a lot that I was like doing the stuff so that people could board the show, and then we'd have some character designer would be freed up to do the cleanups. But it was, but I would be like, it kind of was, you have to do everything it takes to get shows out the door.
When they came to us for Return of the Joker, they told us they wanted a Batman Beyond movie, but they were going to hire a completely different crew to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
My job became to figure out how to stop that from happening.
Yeah. No, it was amazing though, because I was like, yeah.
But you did it because you're such a great politician.
No, I did it because I could stand in one place and go, shut the fuck up. This is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And people were afraid to do that. And I just, I didn't care about, I cared about keeping my job, but I didn't care about, I cared about the characters and the product. And that was eventually what came to my, why Warner's and I parted company, because I cared more about the characters and the product and not about the little internal politics and hurt feelings. So,
when was that, Sean? When did you leave the company?
That was the end of Justice League Unlimited.
Oh, the very end.
I did some of the startup on Legion, and then they decided that I was too prickly to work with because I told the vice president of production that we needed $50,000 to get storyboards so that we weren't going to be behind schedule. And he said, well, we can't do that. And I said, you're telling me the second biggest corporation in the world cannot find $50,000? And you expect me to believe that?
Dan, is Sean too prickly?
What? What?
Okay, I wanted to ask about about Kevin Conroy, because we lost him recently, and I wanted to ask if you guys had any what is your fondest memory of Kevin?
I did not know him. I knew him to say hello to, and that's it. Dan knew him much better than I did. It's
also, in the recording room, it was like his dominance of the role, how much he owned the character, that when we were doing the World's Finest, and Tim Daly had done a wonderful job. He was very good, but he was also occupied at the time. He had a TV series and stuff, so he was frequently not in the records, and so we didn't get his chance to create as much as good a relationship with him. But somehow, when Kevin came in the room, there was a change in the tone in that recording room, and it was like I don't know how, it's like, because Kevin didn't like, he wasn't showy, he didn't try to grandstand, he was very generous an actor, but there was something in the room that changed. There was this respect of like the king came in. It was really interesting and you could kind of see, and I'm not, I have to, Tim did a great job. He was awesome. But when he played off of Kevin, suddenly, boom, it was like, oh, now I get it. I gotta compete with this guy.
Right.
And
right.
it elevated his performance after that. Because he got, oh, so this is what we're doing. And it was amazing. It was amazing.
And
the same thing happened with Justice League. When he was in Justice League, he was the dominant guy in the room, and he didn't show it. He didn't act like it. He didn't push anything. He wasn't an ego, but people just treated him like royalty.
Yeah. That whole Justice League, that whole World's Finest experience was, because we were nervous. We were really nervous about it, and Bruce might not admit it now, but he was nervous about going back to Batman at that point, and then Bruce realized that he had to do something different. We couldn't just pull the Batman the animated series into Superman, that it wasn't going to work design wise, and it was going to be just dancing on your own grave.
Exactly.
But I mean, we were all very nervous about it. I remember the first footage came back, and we went into Bruce's office. I think it was you, Dan, me, Bruce. Who else? With Butch, maybe?
Probably.
It wasn't a lot.
No.
But we went into Bruce's office, and we locked the door and watched the first footage that had come back. And when it finished, Bruce stopped the videotape. So I don't know if we used to have these things called videotapes, they were cassettes. But Bruce stopped the videotape, and we all sat there in silence for a minute. And he turned around and went, "Well, boys, we did it. We topped Batman."
Yeah.
And that was a really good feeling. That was a really good feeling.
It was.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
No, it really was extraordinary. It was from the get-go, from the script, when Alan oh, let's have Bruce and Lois Lane date, and we're like, what? Oh, yes, of course.
The first team up in World's Finest, that's what's going on. Lois has got a huge crush on Bruce Wayne. That goes back to the 50s.
It's in the comics. It's in the comics. And it was just kind of and that's the secret, by the way, is to pull things out of the comics and just do it in a way that people didn't expect or see and feel as fresh. And you're like, no, it's been done. It's all been done.
Yeah. See, that exactly talks back to what we were talking about earlier, which is that I think that a super reverential fan of Superman and Batman wouldn't even think of that, even if it was in the comics, right?
Right.
But you're like, well, there was this in the comics, and we're just going to expand on that.
Yeah, there's a phrase that I use because I work with writers now and getting live action scripts ready for producers, and I work with producers finding scripts, and the phrase I always use is, "Let the thing be what the thing is." Don't try and layer on top of it. Don't just let the thing be what the thing is. And if you look at that world, it makes perfect sense that Lois Lane is got Clark Kent chasing her. She's in love with Superman. Obviously, she's sort of like a little off balance when it comes to a guy, and she meets Bruce Wayne, who's incredibly handsome, incredibly rich, and super masculine. Of course, she'd be attracted to him. That makes perfect sense, because the Bruce Wayne character in the comics at that time and in ours is not is completely different than Clark Kent. He's not meek and mild. He's a billionaire playboy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, who doesn't love that?
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to ask about is Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn, right? A character that was created for her. Am I right, Dan?
Yeah. Yeah.
The success, the breakout of that specific character in the last 30 years has been incredible. Would you have ever even imagined that working on it?
That one caught me by surprise. I mean, I loved her. I thought, wow, I want to see more of this character. It didn't dawn on me that everyone agreed with me. And everyone wanted to see more of her as well. For some reason, I just thought, oh, it's just me. It would be really cool if we got to see a little bit more of this one, because she's really fun. And
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
Well, I don't remember who it was, but I remember being at the table in Hall H at San Diego Comic-Con as it's filling up with the, umpteen hundred people that it holds, and a whole bunch of, I don't know who I was sitting next to on the panel, but a whole bunch of Joker and Harley couples walk in, and they're sitting in the front, and whoever was sitting next to me said, "Do they not understand what this relationship is?" That's the part I find amazing about it, is that
exactly.
I understand the attraction of the character. I understand the character is funny, that the character is a breakout, but like, do you not understand what this is? Not a good relationship. This is not, who you take home to mom.
Yeah. And it's both of that. It really that was a little bit disconcerting, because it's sort of like, it's not healthy. Yeah, it's like,
right.
And I kind of thought, wow, are they projecting their own dysfunctional relationship here? Is that what's really happening here? Because that's the thing. It's like, Harley, I get it's Harley and the Joker as a couple is the thing that kind of was a little
terrifying,
a little odd. Yeah, because it not healthy.
Well, Dan, I think that the Joker movie a few years ago has proven that a lot of people actually do identify with the Joker.
Yeah, I liked it better when it was called Taxi Driver.
I think that's a common sentiment.
Yeah.
A quick question: Tim Daly or George Newber?
Tim.
I like how Shaun has a really quick answer and then can't decide.
I really love George. I think George he had done a lot of wonderful performances.
Yeah.
Tim gave us not only a good Superman and a great Clark, but he gave us an amazing Bizarro, which was it was a heartbreaking performance. And I really love his Bizarro. And so, there's that, but I love what George did. George was phenomenal. So I can't really, George is great, so
I think George is a really good actor, and I like his performance. I have a problem. Dan may remember some arguments that took place that I was involved with this over the timbre of George's voice, because it's just a little too high for me. And I realized at a certain point that Batman's the only sort of like deep Supermanly voice allowed on the show.
Right.
And that everybody else had to like work around that. And I got really tired of the Batman has to be the coolest guy all the time thing when there were other people there. I'd be okay with Batman having falling down once in a while. So I like the timbre of Tim's voice better. So that's
I got you.
That's a weird Shaun thing.
Shaun, do you think Batman is too protected in general?
Yes. I think DC has they seem hell bent on driving Batman into the ground. And some of the stuff that we had to fight to get on some of those shows didn't seem like the sort of things you would have to fight. That they were terrified of Batman. DC was terrified of Batman ever looking silly.
Yep, that's the thing.
And it just he's too protected, and he becomes too much of a godlike figure. And to me, that takes away part of what I think Batman is. So that's I have a personal connection to the character and a personal thought about the character. And this goes back to when I was writing for DC. I wrote an issue of Aquaman that Batman guest starred in, and there was a point in the script where Batman sneaks up on Aquaman, and Aquaman turns around and hits him and sends him over the side of a roof because Aquaman lives at the bottom of the ocean. And in my first issue, I had him punch through the wall of a submarine. So what's Batman going to do if he gets hit? He's going to get knocked off the side of a building. And the whole executive editing committee was like, no, you can't do that. You can't make Batman look bad. He has to be able to block it. Like, what?
No.
Yeah.
Here's the thing.
And I'm sorry, just one more thing. My charge with Aquaman was to try and make him cool. Because
exactly.
at that time, he was just the guy who talks to fish.
Right.
So, I was logicking out how powerful he is. He's really strong.
Yeah. But gee, not at the expense of Batman. You know, that's the thing that's like, come on.
I do. So yeah, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah. Well, DC was made up of a lot of people that grew up when the Adam West show was on, and they were already old when it was on, and they hated it. They hated the show because it was funny.
Yeah.
I'm younger, and our generation was younger, so we watched the show, and it was real to us.
Yep.
We didn't get the joke until we were older.
Right.
And so there was a certain amount of reverence we had to that fun aspect of the character as well. I love the dark stuff. I do like it a lot. Year one is amazing,
Yep.
and I love, those story. The Neil Adams stuff was amazing, and it's like the Simonson Manhunter Batman team up. Oh my gosh, all of this. I love all that stuff. That's Batman's real and dark. But I also have like a soft spot in my heart for the lighter Batman too, and the Dick Sprang, and all the stuff that inspired that TV show. And it's like, that's Batman too, all of that stuff. We shouldn't just like sweep it under the rug. But DC was at that point, very embarrassed, and they were embarrassed by that stuff, and they didn't want people ever laughing at their stuff.
Yeah,
and it's
I remember
we're
getting
laughing with it. We're laughing. No, they're laughing at it, and you're like, oh, for crying out loud.
I remember getting an email about the one where Batman sings.
Yes.
And like and the email said, we're afraid people are going to laugh at Batman. And I'm like, so what, is it going to hurt his feelings? That was when I had the I had the argument. I think it was with Paul. It might have been with Marty, but I had the argument, and they said Batman wouldn't do that. And I picked up the script and said, yes, he would, because it's written down right here.
Yeah.
And he's a fictional character. So if it's written down, he's going to do it. And they're like, no, that's not how you handle a character. Like, that's exactly how you handle a character.
But the funny thing was that he did sing before in the comics.
Right.
There is an episode, there is a comic that I had like from the 40s where he was in, but the reality is though, he sings badly. It was like he and Dick Grayson like go undercover in the Gotham Opera House. It's like a Phantom of the Opera thing, and the opera the conductor is like, oh, you guys sound terrible. Just mouth the words and sit in the back, just bang the hammers, And but I think like Paul made an excuse. It's like, oh, he had to learn to sing, for some stakeout thing and whatever. He justified it somehow. Like, yes, Batman can do anything.
That is one of the greatest episodes of the entire DC animated universe. Susan Eisenberg mentions it all the time on her socials.
Yeah. Came very close to not being what you saw.
So they have a problem maybe with Batman singing, but they had no problem with turning Wonder Woman into a pig for 20 minutes.
No. Oh no, I think there was some pushback against that.
Yeah, probably. I don't know. I just get the scripts. I don't hear the drama usually behind, except for the Justice Guild episode. That stuff, because the drama carried into the actual script and the and the actual production practically. So we were like the very last minute kind of clearing names to once we had them designed, it's like, now what do we call them? That was a tough one.
I feel like Shaun has feelings about this episode. It's a great episode, Shaun.
I wanted to use the Justice Society. I'm a huge fan of those crossover comics, and I was really thrilled to do one of those. By the way, I just bought and read the first collection of Crisis crossovers starting back in the 60s, and I had them when I was a kid, again, my brother's comics, and they were very confusing as a little kid. And now having them all in one place and being able to read them, I'm proud to say that it wasn't because I was a little kid, it was because of Gardner Fox. They were confusing.
Yeah.
Was, but I wanted to use those characters, and I didn't see how this could possibly hurt them. But DC was dead set that if we use the Justice Society like this, they will never, ever be able to use them again.
Right.
That was the exact phrase they used. We'll never be able to use these characters again.
I will take their argument to some degree, because the thing that we all think we're just making stories. We're all just like, we're making stories. We're putting stuff out there. We're trying to make the best shows we possibly can. When DC looks at the numbers as inconsequential as they seem to an executive, they're millions of viewers. Of viewers. The people who are buying comics are tens of thousands of people, maybe 100 if you're lucky. At that point, people it wasn't out there. And so they knew that once something aired, we were the legitimate impression that people would have. They would see these characters for the first time. So it was more important for them, to control us, to go, hey, this has to be accurate to the comic, because, well, honestly, more people are going to watch your show than ever going to read our comics.
Well, they never said that. They never said that. But it was always sort of, they couldn't say that, but it was, the reality was more people, and we never, we weren't the gorilla, we were just like, we get it. You guys own these guys. So we treat, you're making the comics. This is where it comes from. And we were comic guys. If we had been real TV guys, we were just like, come on. But we were real nerds, and we took it because we got it. We understood that this is their property. They're really the gatekeepers here. We get and
it.
We cared about it. We
love this.
We all cared about those characters so deeply.
Exactly. And that's why I didn't object when the edict came down, because I didn't want them to die. I didn't want them to be dead. I love the story. I think it's fantastic. And like you, it's on the page. They're fictional. They're not real. Yeah, I get it. But it's sort of like that whole imaginary story versus. It's like, wait, but then they're really dead, aren't they? And suddenly I'm like, my mindset was like, I was on their side in the sense of that. I get it. Okay. But this is a great story, isn't it? And they were like, yes, it's a great story. Do it. But Watchmanize it, change it, and do that thing that Alan Moore did with Charlton characters, and we're like, oh, okay. And so that's why that happened. The problem is that then they became very sticky about the names, because we were like, all right, so this is a cipher for the, so he can't be the Green Guardian because we've called Green Lantern that. They can't be the Scarlet Speedster because that's what the Flash is called. And we can't just use a cipher for them. And I'm like, come on, why not? Why not just, they were so sticky with the names that to the very last minute, we didn't have legal clearance from them. And then we'd have to go through our lawyers to get legal clearance on trademarks of names that you had to make up so words like guardsman had to be used.
And that was a big change that happened in production over the years. Like when they were doing Batman and when we were doing Pinky and the Brain, and even the first season of Superman, we had to have scripts approved by two people. Somebody in-house and somebody at the network. That was it. Right. That was all. Yep. And by the time we got to Justice League Unlimited, I had a list of 12 people that I had to have sign off on every script. And after Return of the Joker, they didn't trust us at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we've been here for an hour and a half, so I'm gonna go really quickly through my last few questions, and we can do a lightning round. Feel free to answer quickly, but also feel free to expound if you wanna. Okay. So here's my first question for the lightning round, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I totally didn't expect any pushback on this, and 10 being I can't believe we got away with that. Tell me on a scale of 1 to 10 where you would rank the following moments. Over the Edge, the new Batman Adventures Over the Edge, Barbara Gordon dies.
Did not think we were going to get away with that.
No, same here.
No. Yeah, was pretty sure I was going to be writing a check for a lot of ADR and retakes on that one.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even if it was a dream sequence.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about 10, but certainly a 9 on I didn't believe it was going to happen. Yeah.
9.75.
Exactly. And that was one of those ones that almost didn't happen. In that Bruce had said no more dream shows, and then Paul comes to me and tells me the story, and I'm like, well, you got to tell Bruce, you gotta do this. And Bruce is like, you bastard. All right, this is it, the last dream show.
Does Jim Gordon know that Batman is Bruce Wayne?
He's pretty sure, but he doesn't want to really know.
Exactly. He can't say because that would make him complicit.
Right.
So yeah, I think he knows. He can't be that dumb. He's yeah.
Does Lois Lane know that Superman is Clark Kent?
No.
No.
She doesn't want to know. She doesn't want to know. She actually, to me, in some ways, she has some fun playing those two against each other, and she doesn't want to lose that.
That.
Okay.
Yeah, I think inside she might, but she's not ever going to admit it or
Right.
really like even to get there.
Right.
Back to the ranking the moments thing. The climax of the Roxy Rocket episode.
Still surprised. Still
10.
surprised.
10 squared.
There was a lot of pushback after the airing. We thought we'd gotten away with something, and we hadn't.
Yeah.
Dan, I think you once told me that you think if it was a year later, you wouldn't have gotten away with it.
Yes.
Yeah. We keep in mind that the Kids WB was a new network, and they had like, I think what was it? Christopher Keenan was the BS&P person, so it was like people that hadn't really ever done it before.
Christopher Joey Franks.
Joey, one of the, but it was all in house because it was Gene McCurdy and it was all the Kids WB was in house at that point, and so these were people that hadn't really done had gone to to censor school,
Right.
whereas Avery Coburn knew what we weren't allowed to do and let us get away with stuff on the original Batman. She let us get away with a lot.
Well, they presented you with a list, right? There was a list of things. Just don't do these, and we'll be good. And I think we carried that over into Kids WB.
Right, but the thing was that list was like, but can we do this in this context? Can we do this time?
Right.
And they were like, all right, we like the story. I get why you want to do this. Okay, fine. And that's what there was like. There were all these things that were like these hard rules suddenly became sort of like a little tiny bit malleable. And there was less of that at the first season or two of Kids WB. And then it became a real network again later.
Yeah, and while we did Batman Beyond, there was a changeover because at one point Gene was the president of Warner Brothers Animation and Kids WB.
Yeah.
And then they decided that wasn't working too well, so there was a changeover, and they were not sympathetic to our cause, shall we say?
No.
The entire flashback sequence in Return of the Joker.
Which one? The one that we shot, or the one that we released? Because there were 3 separate sequences.
I suppose the one that you shot.
We knew it was dicey. We covered our ass. I covered our ass by shipping huge amounts of storyboards and tapes to Warner Home Video to let them know what was going on. I would call them and make sure they got them, and they just never looked at anything, and then acted surprised when they saw the first.
They approved the script, they approved the boards, they approved an animatic, they approved everything.
We
And
didn't do
then-
we didn't do an
Oh,
animated.
that's why we didn't do animatics back then. Yeah, but they clearly didn't know how to look at the stuff.
They weren't looking at it. The one
they
guy
weren't.
told the one guy literally told me, I don't have time to look through that.
And so when it came down and you know, stuff happened, you know, we were sort of like taking a, you know, what the heck? But you guys had all of this,
Right.
and they didn't do anything about it.
And Bruce, from what I understand, denies it now, but he and I were in really deep shit over that. We were in really deep shit. We had to go to Burbank every day for a week to get spanked. And he was working late nights editing, trying to figure out how to make this work. We were Gene, not with Gene. Gene understood what was going on.
No, she understood. We were just
the rest of
making
them, our names were mud.
And the thing that's like hilarious about the whole thing was it was a crew screening where the crew was just like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing we've ever done. It was extraordinary. And you know, the uninvited person who watched and went through the roof made our lives hell.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even that involved. I wasn't really involved, except that I was, you know, I was a fan of what was going on. And so the one thing I'll say though is that Bruce and Joe Gall at least found the re-edit a fun challenge. As much as the spanking and the yelling and all of that stuff happening behind the scenes, the challenge of eliminating stuff and editing stuff out was actually it was a different kind of game. It was a puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
And that actually made, you know, lessened the pain of what they were doing to some degree. What really hurts is that the score had been altered because, you know, it had already been mastered. It was done. It was a done film.
Yeah.
We had aired, you know, the release dates and everything was done, and then they had to like go back and recut music because the music was hit to the action.
Well, we had to reanimate a large section of that,
and there was that too. Yeah.
And the sad part was what Dan said is that was one of the best experiences of my career up to then, because I was able to figure out how to keep our crew, how to keep it in our little purview, how to do it. And then when it came for the screening, that was I remember calling the lot, because you used to call the lot to get a drive on because we didn't work on the lot. Right. And I remember calling and saying I need a drive on for that. And the security guy going, hold on a second. And he went away and he came back. He goes, Shaun McLaughlin, your producer on Batman Beyond? I said, yeah. He goes, what do you need a drive on for? Don't you like your parking spot? What parking spot? Mr. McLaughlin, you have your own parking spot on the lot. And if you want, someone will meet you there to carry the film. What?
Well, that's good to know. Eventually.
And then nobody told me. But then I got to sit there in the screening room and run the screening room and work with that. And I felt like a real movie maker.
Wow.
Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy doing a slumber party.
Do you really think they're sleeping?
There we go.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. What he said.
Justice League, the once and future thing. Everyone dies. Including Static, including Batman Beyond.
Did we think we were going to get away with it?
Yeah.
I don't remember that even being a question because it was set in the future and we were creating a whole new line of stuff.
Exactly.
Oh, so that one was fine.
Timeline, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember any pushback on that at all.
No, I don't think so.
Justice League Unlimited, Darkheart, Wonder Woman gives the Atom a ride.
Didn't expect that to happen. Somehow, Butch drew that in the board. It wasn't, I don't know where he was supposed to ride. So, we just... where is it safe to ride on a flying Wonder Woman? Well, that's the safest place.
I told you guys we watched this in college with a bunch of my friends, and when that moment happened, we were drinking and we were like,
well, it's not like he's gonna crawl out of her ear or something,
Yeah.
It's like, it was like it just didn't, yeah, that was.
I honestly think that was something that Butch put in there and expected it to come out,
Oh,
and was
absolutely.
surprised when it didn't come out. So we just kept our mouths shut.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're not going to make us change it, we're not changing it. So
Exactly.
Favorite episode of Batman the Animated Series?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'll always feel On Leather Wings for me. Because it was just the first, and we just all kind of like were, but I have other favorites,
I'd say the first one with the ventriloquist.
Oh,
because that feels like a real sort of like change of pace, Dick Tracy type episode that I think
that's really cool.
Finger and Kane were riffing on when they created the classic villains.
Yeah, that cartoon made me love the ventriloquist.
Yeah. Same here. Yeah. It was, and it also gave Batman the super ventriloquism power that we always knew that he's ready for anything. When he was training, he's like, I'm going to need this. He got the ad in the back of the comic books when he was a kid and learned.
Got the little thing you put in between your thing.
Yeah.
Throw your voice.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised neither of you mentioned Heart of Ice, which is I think the one I see mentioned all the time.
It was one of my favorites, and it would have been had On Leather Wings not have an emotional, connection to that episode, because I was a big Man-Bat fan from the comic. I know, and I, and being a part of his design. I didn't do the final. Mike Kim did that, but and cleaning up on the boards and just like doing turns on Langstrom and all that stuff, and just like the very beginnings of the show. But Heart of Ice was like amazing.
Yeah, for me, it's been pointed to too often. So it's it's one of those things where I can't go back to that well anymore.
And when people go, what's your favorite? For me, like the show you worked on, and I tend to go to Baby Doll, because it was sort of like it clicks all the boxes for me. It's like goofy, and it's scary, and it's funny, and it's like, and it's tragic, and it's all the things that the show is. Like you're saying, that Dick Tracy kind of villain.
Right.
Yes.
Right. That would be my number 2 after the first ventriloquist episode.
Yeah. Which it's on ventriloquist and Baby Doll would have like made a good pairing,
Right.
Yeah.
And Toy Man,
I think Baby Doll only really works in something like animation. I don't think it translates too well.
I wouldn't,
like in comics.
Yeah, that's the other. Oh, well, I don't know about comics. Maybe comics, but certainly not live action.
Well, because you can't hear the change in voice.
Yeah, but you can
write it.
Yeah. Live action would be tough, but you'd have to have just the right person to cast.
You can write it in a way that people will hear the voice in their heads.
Yeah.
Favorite episode of Superman the Animated Series?
Apocalypse Now.
Yes.
I was gonna say I do think that show completely changes momentum the moment he finally meets Darkseid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the one.
And I also really like when Orion, because I'm just such a big Orion fan for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
When Orion shows up and does the whole history of New Genesis, it just makes me like.
Dan, that's you, isn't it? Wasn't that you? Figured that all out?
That is me. I figured all that out. Yeah.
Did you have Bullock?
No. Dave. No, he worked on the climactic fight at the end. That stuff was Manly, but I went back in and I redrew and added other scenes that I just pulled right from the comics, and I was trying to figure out the Kirby stuff, which was so much fun too.
That was a really clever workaround of not having to completely animate all that. It really works beautifully.
Yeah, it worked out really nice. I was really. The narration is awesome, and it was funny because we go into widescreen for that, that little clip. Like, it was fun.
I tell you, Dan, it made me want a New Gods show.
I know, and apparently other people too, because that had been in the works for a feature for a very long time, and they kept dropping the ball on it. But that was going to be like one of the Warner Animation features.
Yep.
Yeah, and when Apocalypse Now ends, of course, you pay big tribute to Jack Kirby, and that's one of my favorite scenes as well.
When we were preparing Superman, Kirby had passed away, and so immediately Dan Turpin turned into Jack as a tribute, and we took the day off and went to the funeral. I still have all the flyers and all the things that they give you, the little notices and all the stuff that from the funeral I kept because it was so meaningful to be there. And so that funeral on the show is Jack's funeral pretty much. That's what it was like.
I think that was the first and maybe only time I've ever seen people pray in Hebrew.
Yeah.
Like in a cartoon.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen it elsewhere.
The only edict we got for that is that it had to be accurate. It had to be faithful. So they actually, I believe, did they actually get a rabbi?
Yeah.
To do
it. They do it in Arthur as well, by the way. Arthur's Perfect Christmas. So
right.
Favorite episode of the new Batman Adventures?
Critters. No, I don't know.
Which one?
Of the new
Critters.
Batman. Oh.
No, obviously Over the Edge. Over the Edge has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that one. Favorite episode of Batman Beyond?
Pilot.
Oh, really? The movie counts.
Oh, well.
Oh, then Return of the Joker.
Yeah, Return of the Joker. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite episode of Static Shock? Did you consider Static as part of the DCAU?
I do, but Dan and I worked on it, so yeah.
Yeah. And it has been, folded in. So, it was like, yes. It initially, no, but then eventually they all crossed over and everything. And even, Justice League, So, yeah, it is. Absolutely.
My favorite is the one that Scott and I pitched for season 2 that we couldn't get the network to buy. So.
What happened?
They said we weren't taking it seriously enough. We had Carmen Dillo and a couple other Bang babies, one of whom was the Lightning Sloth, because he's half sloth, half human. He's the fastest sloth ever in the world. And Possum Boy, who whenever he's threatened plays dead. So we had the 3 most ineffectual supervillains in history, and Static just could not round them all up. And the net we were killing ourselves laughing while we were pitching this. And the network just looked at us like,
yeah.
Shaun,
we're over breakfast at Moe's, Dan.
Yeah. Shaun, I feel like this whole interview I've learned about you that, one, you get in trouble for not taking things too seriously, but then you get really serious about having the right to not take things too seriously.
Yes, yeah. I say it would be fair. Yes,
I love that.
When I was working at DC, an editor who remained nameless dismissed me as that guy who does that funny stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm the one that wanted Aquaman. I fought tooth and nail to have Aquaman actually kill Black Manta in the comics. So apparently, I'm the guy who does the funny stuff.
Yeah. And that's funny too, Gun, that we had resisted the Hook Aquaman, and then when we did him in Justice League, we were like, oh, you know what? He's got to have the hook. And it was like, I don't know how that happened, because it wasn't
DC ordered it because it was the current one. So they really put their foot down on that.
Well, it's like, if we're going to do it, we're just going to go whole hog and really make it count. And
he's going to be Namor. If you're going to turn him into Namor, we're really going to turn him into Namor.
Yeah. So we made it count. So that was the thing. It's like, well, we got to see where this happens and why and how, and it's got to be the biggest thing ever.
Yeah,
you guys out did the Defenders.
Yeah, that was Bruce. Yeah.
Yeah, and he got shit for it too.
Why would you get shit for it?
They noticed.
Moving on. What's your next question?
Okay. Dan, you didn't answer your favorite episode of Static Shock.
I probably, for me personally, it would be the Rubber Band Man episode because.
Oh yeah.
Because it was a lot of fun. I'm a huge Plastic Man fan, and it was the very first script that Dwayne McDuffie had written for animation.
Oh, really?
And so I got to work off his first script, and then on Ben 10, I got to work on his last script for television. So I bookended his entire television animation career. I got to do the first and the last. And it's like I wish there were more. I know that last one is like too sad, you know.
Yeah.
He pitched. We went to Disney. He had me help him pitch something at Disney. So we were actually going to do something together there, and it didn't sell. A Dark Horse project, and it was really fun. I got to spend many months working with Dwayne on that, and it was a joy.
How smart was Dwayne McDuffie?
You can't even begin to imagine how smart Dwayne was.
Level, what is it? Level 7, level 10, level 10. I don't know. It's whatever the Brainiac thing, beyond anyone I've ever known. Yeah.
I just remember him arguing with a network executive over Static. If Static could actually make a manhole cover fly because the physics of it wouldn't work. And I remember I was sitting in Dwayne's office and he's on the phone. He goes, "Oh, physics? You want to talk physics? Good. That's my first master's degree."
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah. No. A prodigy. That.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Yeah. And he left that world because they were, when he was in college, they were misusing his, and they were appropriating things that he had come up with for other purposes. So he decided to go into comics and other things.
I feel like he's going to factor into this next question. Favorite episode of Justice League, not unlimited?
Starcrossed.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was a great one. That was a great
one.
Not unlimited. I love Twilight because of all of the, the getting back to the apocalypse, and the new God stuff. That was a lot of fun. I really liked doing Grodd. I thought that also, the Brave and the Bold episode was a lot of fun, and just sort of accidentally creating a relationship between Batman and Wonder Woman that was a throwaway that Bruce was literally about to throw away, and I kind of went, no, you got to do that, and so that was in the show, and I feel kind of like some ownership of that because he literally was about to throw it away. Nah, it's too much, and no, it's not. It's perfect. Let's do this.
And Powers Booth was great too.
And Powers Booth,
yes,
was awesome.
Just really good, and he took it seriously. I remember he wasn't. A lot of people, one of the things about why Kevin was so great is because Kevin came in and approached it as an actor. He didn't approach it as someone doing a voice. He approached the character as an actor, and Powers did that too. A lot of times you had people come in and like, Dan will know better than I, but they're just like, I'm here to do this stupid cartoon thing. I'm getting paid for 2 hours work, and I'm going to get good residuals over it. And they just sort of throw it away. But every once in a while, you have somebody come in and just really approach it as an actor.
Yeah. There's a line, I believe it was in The Great Brain Robbery, where Powers and Juliet Landau are doing a thing with Tella and Grodd conspiring, and he has this line where he's like, "I'm not some monkey in a cage throwing his," and shh, and she shushes him right on as he says throwing his shh, and it was so funny, and we let her finish the line, and Andrea was about to go, "Well, you know what, you stepped on his line because we're supposed to like separate, but Bruce was like, no, that is exactly, there's no editor can actually get this any better. We're going to have these lines read together like that, and we're just going to have to live with that because that's the big no is you're supposed to let a pause, leave air between the lines, and we're like no because we were going to edit it together that way anyway, and she nailed it. She gave that shh. So we know what he was going to say.
But there was some dude in Korea sitting behind their desk going, why don't I have any air here? How am I supposed to do this?
It was great. It was great. But that was the wonder of having actors in a room together doing stuff. That was the beauty of that show. Was so much of it was that.
When I taught voice acting, I used to say that one of the big differences between the way Disney did stuff and the way Warner's did stuff is that Disney will quite often just have voice after voice after voice come in, And Warner's tried to have actors together as much as possible because you get more. You get, it's not just planning it out in your head; it's reacting to another person.
Right. Because even when Kevin was in New York,
yep,
after 9/11, I mean, he lived there, but he had a place there, but he was there during 9/11, and he stayed there to help. And we phone patched him, but we phone patched him during the recordings. So even though he wasn't, in the room, he wasn't by himself. He was in the room,
right?
And it makes a world of difference.
And Angie too. We never had Angie in the studio for Batman Beyond, did we? Wasn't she always patched in from New York?
I'm not sure. Yes, I think so. I think so. Yeah, you're right.
Law and Order then.
She was doing Law and Order. Yeah. No, or was only no. I forgot which one she was on, but yeah, she wasn't available. She wasn't available. You're right.
I remember
because I never met her. So
I remember Friedel pitching a fit because he wasn't going to meet her because he was had such a crush on her.
Yeah.
I feel along with Dwayne McDuffie coming into Justice League on season 2, the other thing that drove it up another level was all of the fight choreography was all of a sudden on another level too. Like Secret Society was it for me, where like you'd get into the Secret Society versus the Justice League, and then all of a sudden you just cut from one action to another like super seamlessly. It was pretty amazing.
Well, there was a marked lack of tension on the crew after that. And also, what nobody thinks about doing a show like this, and it was one of the things Bruce had been thinking about since the Superman Justice League pitch, is how do you service all these characters on a television screen? And then by that time we had gone digital, so we were actually working widescreen, so you had a whole different sort of composition that you could do, and that would have allow for more more of an image there, that you could have more things in it. You could have several characters doing something at once and trust that it's going to read.
Now, I know, get muddy. And mind you, Cartoon Network let us air the show twice, the 2 airings, and one would be in widescreen, even in the first season. But it was an anticipation for the digital.
Right.
We were faking it. And there were people always like, oh, we're missing the tops and the bottoms. I'm like, no, we're actually composing it for that. The tops and the bottoms are garbage. Don't look at those. We want this widescreen. That's
well, remember we were composing it 4:3 and then cutting off the sides. And then we went to we had a big meeting about it. And then we went
but then we just the bars on the top and the bottom to but then it turns out that's like the digitally where everybody else was doing it was they were doing it wide and cutting off the sides. So we had to like reconfigure our brains to compose for digital.
It was like reverse pan and scan. You had to take a step back.
Yeah. Gosh, what else?
Oh, God, that was a headache. That was like trying to figure that out and understand that and grasp it, and then having to communicate it to multiple people how we were doing things.
Oh, I know what I was going to say about that episode. Is that Adam Van Wyck was a board artist that was an action, and still to this day, a powerhouse action guy who just and he is brilliant at overlapping action and doing all the stuff where something is on one side of the screen and it's kind of like in the background, and then it's like, and then you cut to it and it hooks up. And the problem was that he kind of overboarded things a lot, so you would have a giant storyboard and there would be literally minutes of action that you had to cut out because there wasn't time for it.
Yeah. And he was basically laying stuff out after a certain point.
But it was also brilliant, and there were so many things that would overlap. You're like, oh my God, how do I make this work? So there was a lot of like taking some action from the bottom of a screen and then putting it somewhere else and so that it would actually hook up the same way that he had it, because it was but he was one of these guys that had like, he boarded so much that in another episode where I had to have a fight, Butch had to take a whole fight scene out of an episode once, and I'm like, I'm short on a show, we need some more action, and we were able to like change the character and just like make this work. Oh, it's in a subway. Okay, it's in a sewer or whatever. We just kind of like boom, and we made it work. And I was able to repurpose something that had been boarded for something else. Adam is
Yeah.
brilliant.
Favorite episode of Justice League Unlimited?
For the man who has everything.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I personally Clash for me because I have like the Captain Marvel thing,
Yeah.
and it was so much fun to do that. But for the man who has everything was like that. That really, it was extraordinary. It was extraordinary.
I thought you guys made that story better, and it was already great.
God bless.
I mean, I don't want Jason Todd saving the day.
Don't say that because it was written by a wizard, the original story. So God knows what curse he's going to throw on us.
He's fine.
And to this day, the only product that has his name on it.
Yep, that's true.
Yes,
yeah,
that's true.
I didn't think about that. That's great. That's right. I was just reading about. Yeah,
he trusted us.
Yeah,
and it was the only one. It's the only one where he went, oh yeah, they can do this. Oh yeah. And from what I understand, he liked it. But you're never going to get the official,
Well, Dave Gibbons loved it.
Yeah.
Dave's one of the first people I met in comics, and what a stand-up great guy.
He's great.
He is.
Was Flash and Substance a backdoor pilot?
No.
Was it called Flash and Substance? The Flash episode. Flash and Substance.
I don't think so.
I don't think we were ever talking about. There were like the Jonah Hex thing was a backdoor pilot.
Really?
Yeah.
Right?
I think so.
And wasn't there was something in Superman, wasn't there, that we was thinking about as a backdoor pilot?
Maybe the Dr. Fate, Green Lantern, Dr. Fate, Green Lantern, maybe all of those things could have been.
Aquaman wasn't, because I remember they handed me an Aquaman to develop, and it was completely different than what we had done. But no, I don't think anything was. I think we were kind of aware that we were exposing a lot of characters that might get something, but I don't think we were considering them as a backdoor pilot.
Yeah.
Okay. Are the 2 minutes in Clash where Billy Batson has his whole thing in Fawcett City, while that may not have been a backdoor pilot, did you kind of wish it was?
Oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely. No, without a doubt, absolutely. I wanted to keep doing that character. I was so hurt that it was a one-time use deal.
Yeah. Nobody likes those characters more than me, Dan, and James Tucker. That we
really?
would, yeah. Those were. I mean, Captain Marvel still remains my favorite Golden Age hero.
Pretty much. Yep.
Same. I would love to talk to you guys about him one day. Last question. What are you guys working on now? That you can talk about.
We'll see what happens. We'll see what the future holds.
Shaun, you want to talk about that poster behind you?
That's The Last Night of the Twilight, is a short film I made last year. We have an unscheduled screening, but it's going to screen at the Man's Chinese Theater at some point in the next few months. I'm developing it. I have got new management as a result of it. I'm developing it as a feature that we're going to take out soon. Yeah.
Cool.
Full length feature.
Yep.
Awesome.
And then my day gig is I'm a script executive for the ISA and CS Productions, and I work with producers, anybody from brand new producers to major streamers and studios and stars that you would all have heard of, and help them find scripts from writers that are not necessarily a part of the Hollywood system.
That's really cool. Congratulations on developing Last Night of the Twilight, which, makes, for anybody who doesn't know, it's basically a mockumentary on Batman, a Batman type character.
Yeah, the pitch line for it is what you do when you're broke and your endless war against crime is not over. Basically, Batman loses a personal injury lawsuit.
Yeah. I feel like DC wouldn't let you get away with this for Batman.
It came about because I was Mike Martz was trying to recruit me about 10 years ago to write for Batman. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want Batman to have nothing except his costume.
Yeah.
And have to go out and still be Batman.
Do you know that in the comics he's broke now?
No, I didn't know that.
It all cycles back around, but yeah, congratulations on that. So thank you guys for joining today. I know it ran quite long. I'm sorry I was late, but thank you again. And I just want to say thanks again, Shaun. As Dan knows the story, but I mentioned a lot that I was watching Justice League in college. We actually made a whole drinking game around it, so those are some of my fondest memories that I can't remember.
What was the impetus for the drink? Was it like, oh, Superman's down, or it's like
every time they touch their ear to communicate with somebody?
Yeah.
We developed it. From what I can remember, the rules we developed it during Justice League, not Unlimited, and then we just have to make stuff up then. But one was whenever Superman hit the ground.
Yep. Okay, I knew it.
Yeah.
One was whenever anyone pointed out implicitly or explicitly that Batman had no powers. Like when Amazo goes, "You have no powers." One was whenever Green Lantern shot anything that wasn't just a beam.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
a tough one. I'm sure
there wasn't a lot.
No, you could stay sober on that one. I'm pretty sure.
One was whenever Wonder Woman invoked the name of a Greek goddess.
Oh yeah, great Hera.
Hera, help us.
One was whenever the Martian Manhunter is basically a wise old man. And one was whenever the Flash was a jackass.
Oh,
you must have been drinking a lot.
I know. That's like.
But the one that killed us was whenever Hawkgirl used her mace.
Yeah.
We were like,
she liked that mace.
And then you guys put out A Better World, and we're like, oh my god, now we have to drink twice.
Yeah.
Well, we were thinking about you when we did
that. Exactly.
Thanks for only having one Superman. Oh, wait, no, one Flash in it.
Yeah. Well, that's that was the catalyst.
Thanks so much, guys. This is really a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good talking to both of you again. Dan.
Yes. Good to see you, man.
Good to see you.